Hello and welcome. You are watching my Warrior leveling spec video. Warriors in Rift can actually be quite difficult to solo level. They don't do enough damage at early levels to kill things efficiently, and they don't have nearly the survivability that you might expect from a plate wearer. That said, warriors can be very valuable in groups and make excellent tanks, so having a high-level warrior can be a lot of fun. So this spec will give you a successful leveling path in the early levels, and by level 40 it gets flat out easy. The nice thing is that you'll actually spend nearly half of your leveling time between the levels of 40 and 50, and while other builds are struggling in that level range, this build will have you absolutely dominating. So if you play this build, if you played some of my other builds and you realized that your leveling process is slower, well, that's not the fault of the build so much as the fault of the warrior, but just know that you have something to look forward to. So as always, with a leveling spec, I want to focus on survivability first, followed by DPS. So the first soul to take is the Beastmaster. Using a pet with a warrior in Rift has been a different experience than I've ever had before in an MMORPG. The warrior has no ranged attacks to speak of, so the pet is almost like a living shield, which I use to start attacks, take the first few hits, and also to pick up aggro on any added mobs during a fight. I find that early on, fighting two mobs at once should be avoided. The lesser primal companion is a bit squishy early on. So at level 1, my first attack is Fierce Strike, which does minor damage but increases my pet's damage on the victim of this strike, plus it gives me an attack point. My first 3 talents are going into Survival of the Fittest, which increases my hit rating. This has opened Tearing Slash, a strong attack which consumes attack points and also does bleed damage over time. My second soul is Paragon, which specializes in dual wielding, so 2 one-handed weapons is a must with this build. So my second level 3 talent goes to Combat Precision, which causes my attacks to ignore some of the target's armor. Paragon gives me Dual Strike, a point-generating ability which is more powerful than Fierce Strike and becomes my primary attack throughout. Now, I usually open with Fierce Strike at this point to get the extra pet damage, and then use Dual Strike and Tearing Slash until the fight is over. My level 4 and 5 talents finish off Survival of the Fittest, and this has opened Primal Recovery, a heal over time, which I try to keep active on my pet throughout any fight to keep him alive. For my third soul, I'm taking Reaver. Right away, I get Dire Blow and Ravaging Strike, and I disregard both, but I also get Soul Sickness, a powerful ranged damage over time ability that I use to open fights. My first level 6 point goes to Iron Bonds, which improves my bond abilities, and the second goes to Combat Precision, which opens up Reaping Harvest, an attack point consuming ability that replaces Tearing Slash. Now this will do more damage than Tearing Slash, assuming that I kill my target within 10 seconds after using it. My levels 7 through 10 points finish Iron Bonds, which opens up Bond of Might, which increases my strength, and Protective Companion, which puts my pet into a defensive stance that helps him to survive. Now, Protective Companion is the only stance I use throughout the leveling process. My extra level 9 talent goes to Combat Precision. At this point, I've done what I need to do to shore up my survivability in the early levels, and I need to start focusing on damage. Now, I still want to fight 1 at a time whenever possible. I can beat 2, but it's challenging, and 3 is pretty much certain death. So my level 11 through 14 talents go to finish Combat Precision and to put 3 points into Teaching of the Five Rings, which increases my melee damage. But more importantly, this has opened Rising Waterfall, a powerful follow-up attack which I can use after any point-generating ability. Way of the River, which increases my critical hit chance, and Focus of Strength, which increases my strength, plus I can cast it on my pet. And also Turn the Blade, a powerful attack that follows a parry or block and is not on the global cooldown, so it's an extra attack as long as I have the presence of mind to use it. So now I'm opening each fight by sending my pet. Once he has engaged my foe, I use Soul Sickness, then run in and hit him with Rising Waterfall, Dual Strike, Reaping Harvest, and then I use Dual Strike, Rising Waterfall, and Reaping Harvest until he's dead. And now I'm going to turn my attention to the Reaver tree. My levels 15 through 18 talents go into Entropic Embrace, which increases my death damage. This is open Blood Fever, which is a nice damage over time attack, Binding of Affliction, which increases my damage, and Gift of the Reaver, which increases my health. My second level 18 point goes into Soul Feast, which heals me for half of the damage of Soul Sickness. This is also opened Crest of the Abyss, which increases my armor. My level 19 point goes to Plague Bringer, which causes my Reaver damage over time abilities to be multi-target for 12 seconds. Now, this is crucial for handling multiple opponents. My next 3 points all go to Imbued Armor, which reduces the damage I take. This is open Necrotic Wounds, another nice damage over time ability, and Grim Lure, which is a tanking ability that I'm disregarding, and Track Death Creatures. At this point, my rotation goes like this. I send the pet, Soul Sickness, followed by Necrotic Wounds from range, and then I run in and hit Blood Fever, Reaping Harvest, Dual Strike, Rising Waterfall, Dual Strike, Reaping Harvest. I've pretty much forgotten about Fierce Strike unless I hit my pet's target with it and then turn my focus to a second target. I also need to make sure to throw in Turn the Blade whenever available and to open the fight with Plague Bringer if I'm fighting multiple mobs. Now at this point it is definitely easier to handle 2 mobs, but 3 mobs, still not a good idea. My level 22 point goes to Shadow of Dread, which fears the target, and it's really kind of an oh crap button in case I get in over my head. At this point, I need to turn back to Beastmaster to make sure I get Summon Greater Primal Companion by level 30, so my next 2 points go to Tenacious Wounds, which increases bleed damage. Now this is open up Flesh Rip, which I can use after my pet critically hits. It's like Turn the Blade and not on a global cooldown, so it's an extra attack. Now, I went ahead and put my second level 24 talent into Bond of Alacrity to increase my movement speed a bit. This is an ability that actually stays on indefinitely after you use it, so it is worth the 1 talent point. My next 2 points go into Primal Fury, which increases my pet's crit chance. This has also opened Slashing Strike, which is a bleed, damage over time ability that hits multiple targets at close range. Now, I use this right after Blood Fever to finish off the rotation. I should note that at this point, I generally stick with the same rotation every fight and get my damage over time abilities ticking, even if I have 2 or 3 points at the start of the fight. Now, my next 5 points go into Strike to Maim, which does damage over time after a crit, and this has opened up Bond of Feline Grace, which increases dexterity, and Enraged Companion, which is disregarded. My second level 30 talent goes to Summon Greater Primal Companion. Now, between now and level 40, it becomes easier and easier to survive in fights against 3 mobs. But even with Greater Primal, my pet still will be dying quite frequently. Now, in difficult fights, I make sure to keep Primal Recovery on him the whole time, and as long as I make sure that he holds the aggro of at least 1 mob until he dies, which he probably will, but at least I'll be able to survive most multiple target fights. But I will also be summoning my pet quite a lot. Now, sticking with 1 or 2 mobs at this time is still the way to go. Now I'm finished with Beastmaster and headed back over to the Reaver tree, which works wonders for both my damage and my survivability. My next 5 points go into Planar Attunement, which increases all of the damage of my damage over time abilities. I've also opened up Vicious Cleave, a multiple target melee attack, Concussion, which is another multi-target attack, but really is more of a tanking ability and I rarely use it, and Weakening Essence, which slows the enemies, but pretty much is another tanking ability and can be disregarded. Levels 35 and 36 finish off Imbued Armor, and this opens Binding Atrophy, which I disregard. I put 2 points into Power in the Blood, which reduces damage taken if I'm below 30% health. I've also opened Infestation, a situational ability which hits the target and then does a bunch of damage 8 seconds later. Level 38 goes to Soul Devour, which increases the healing I receive when I cast Soul Sickness. My first level 39 point will finish off the Reaver tree with Master of the Abyss. Now this is a point-consuming ability that does some self-healing and can hit multiple targets, so the more targets it hits, the more healing I receive. It's on a 2-minute cooldown, so I only use it when I need it, but this definitely ends any lingering survivability issues I might have, and I find that I almost never die anymore. So that'll finish off the build in terms of important abilities, and the rest of the abilities I open will be situational. Everything else I'm taking will serve to enhance my damage. So back to the Paragon tree I go, and my next 2 points finish Teaching of the Five Rings. At this time I'm level 40, and everything has finally come together for this build. I get all the right ranks at level 40 to increase my damage significantly. Plus, I notice a massive upgrade in my pet's survivability. So I can now take on multiple mobs with ease, really, doing fantastic AoE damage. So it's very fast AoE grinding and a lot of survivability at this point. So I'll finish the build first by putting 5 points into Weapon Master, which gives me a chance to get extra attack points. And now I'm gaining points fast enough that I actually do throw in Reaping Harvest into my rotation whenever I have the 3 points. Now 5 more points go to Flowing Strikes, which increases my crit chance, and my final 3 points go into Deadly Grace, which has a confusing description, but basically increases the damage of my Dual Strike. And that's it for my warrior leveling build. I'm going to take us out here on a little view of the AoE goodness of this build at the high levels. And thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.